rename myself?
I would. Yeah, Lauren.
Okay. M, or do you just have us do first name?
M is fine, or whatever you want. You can be, Mrs. Chewbacca if you like, or whatever.
I'm gonna go with Lauren. Okay.
That's fair. Okay.
I don't know why I'm surprised.
All right. Okay. So I've got old friend here, Lauren, who's come on the podcast. We're all warmed up now, and we're going to talk about sobriety. She was just telling me that she teaches bar, that kind of the ballet exercise.
The new bar, basically. The bar, the new bar I like to hang out at.
Right. Oh, that's your new, right. Yeah. Well, how many times a day do you have to say that, right? That's like growing up in high school. My last name is Littlejohn. Yeah. And like being the smallest kid in class, it was just, at some point it's redundant. But so I did 3 years of tap, jazz, and ballet.
Amazing.
I like the bar. I think it was really good exercise.
It's amazing. And it's really good cross training, like for hiking, for running, for anything else you're doing. I feel like it really, my bounce back and recovery of my muscles is really good. So check out a bar near you.
Right. Yeah. Let's something like that. So let's talk about your story. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll interrupt from time to time when I find a fun spot to chat about.
Okay.
And then then we'll just kind of like get through there, and maybe we'll take about 40 minutes or so, and we'll just see how it shakes out.
Great. Am I looking at the right spot in the camera?
I think so.
Over here? Okay.
Yeah, you look here. You look here if you're lying, and look here if you're trying to tell your story more creatively.
Okay, got it. Well, we move things around at the last minute, so creature habit. We'll be fine.
I can't see the plant.
If I look cross-eyed at any point, it'll probably look more normal. So, yeah. What do you want to know?
Okay. So we'll take this like a normal share. Like, where did you start? Just briefly hit the high points.
Yeah.
And then I'll just kind of find a common thread, and then when we find something that sounds like fun to talk about, we'll talk about that.
Cool. Well, my story starts, I was probably an alcoholic from birth. I can look back. But what I will say is, like, from as long as I can remember as a kid, I was an overdoer. I was an over anything, an over worrier, an over, like, everything was too much. I always felt too much. And I know now that that's really not, that's like part of my superpower now, right? It's a gift that I have, is to be sensitive and to feel a lot, but I had no handle on it as a kid. So I had
just walked around feeling everything.
Just feeling everything, my feelings, your feelings, the dog's feelings, somebody crossing the street. Like, I remember like watching a kid cross the street in the rain. He didn't have an umbrella, so he's soaked. And I'm like sitting in a car at the intersection, and I like still think about this kid. It's been like 20 fucking years or something, So it's like, excuse my language, but it's like, where's that thought? Like, what good is that? Like, what is that? So as a kid, my childhood was pretty, I would say wholesome. I don't want to say normal, because what's normal, but my parents are still married. The house itself, there was stability in the household. But I always felt like the other shoe was going to drop. So it took me a long time to understand that those behaviors from the beginning kind of like set me on a certain path. Okay. And because I was always overdoing, a lot of pressure on myself, hardworking student, like, the oldest child, did everything right, put a ton of pressure on.
The oldest. Oh man, that just speaks volumes. Yeah.
And both my parents are like the oldest of their siblings, So I'm
like
the oldest child of two oldest.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one sister.
One sister. Okay.
So I don't know. Looking back, I can see that from the beginning, it was everything felt too much, or I felt like I was too much. It was one of those two things. So there was just this ongoing like story in my head about just being concerned and being, hyper vigilant about things, like being not necessarily like, I hadn't had like crazy like trauma or like chaos in my life, but there was always this like understanding that there were bad things that happened and that the world was scary and that I had to count on myself. And so for someone that could empower them to like, you know, feel strong or move through life like with a confidence. But for me, it just rattled me. Like I felt super rattled all the time. So by the time I found alcohol, I was like needing a break.
How old were you? Were you in high school?
Yeah, I was in high
You
school.
sound like you're a junior in high school.
Yeah, I was around a junior, I mean like 16.
Yeah, that's,
you know?
Junior-ish.
Yeah, so it was, and again, it wasn't like alcohol was super available, but it also back to that like rule following and kind of the order I kept craving. I didn't mess with it very much. I was kind of like the designated driver for people. I really started to drink my like senior year of high school, you know, after kind of, I knew I was going to college. I kind of like, again, checked all the boxes and now I could party. I could take the edge off. And I definitely drank alcoholically from the beginning.
From the, like you
Yeah.
had one, your first time having it, you had one, and then you're like, I'm in.
Yeah. And immediately like, you know, drank for the effect because I felt the effect and I liked it. You know, I felt more myself.
You know, a story I've never told them on this channel is that when I was like 16, I loved to like pray early in the mornings. I would like wake up and I was just like kind of like ferocious kind of Christian character. And like I had my Bible on my desk at school kind of thing. So, and I would love to wake up and pray early in the morning. So at night, I found out that I could just drink 2 caps of NyQuil and I'd go to sleep.
Oh yeah.
And so I do this for like 5 months, and it's like every night. And like I'm with my friends, and I'm like, hey, hold on one second, I got to go to Rite Aid and get some NyQuil. And my best friend goes, man, I think you've got a problem. I think you've got a real NyQuil problem because you talk about it a lot. You seem to drink it a lot. Like you have it, and you have what, 2 or 3 like shots every night. I'm like, yeah. Takes the edge off so I can pray in the morning. Anyway,
Oh my God. Yeah.
that is so it turns out that I drank alcoholically while passionately pursuing God. Who knew?
Yeah. Ferocious Christian character. That's a great line. I'm gonna use that again. Ferocious Christian character. Yeah.
It was a true role. Okay, so you're going to college. And
so go to college and like shot out of a cannon, like so ready to get away, and I'm just burned out, you know, like just burned out on life. And it's like, I'm 18 years old. So, and again, I'm very aware that I have no real reason to truly be burned out. You know, like I haven't wanted for much. I've been a hardworking person. The way that, you know, the world, what I've been blessed with, like I didn't worry about the little things. I never had to worry about my electricity being turned off. We were never hungry for food. Like there was stability. So I don't really know why I'm so freaking fatigued. You know, it's like my mind, it's what's going on up here and how I'm relating to the world, and where I can't seem to stay present in the moment because I'm constantly like anticipating some shoe dropping somewhere, whether it's real or not.
So you never really experienced like hunger or anything like that? Like,
No.
Okay, so yeah, that's actually an interesting idea, because I know like for me, I was like, we grew up super poor, like just crazy poor. And like if you didn't sit down at dinner table at 5:30 at night, then you were probably having like toast, maybe if you were lucky. But as I talk to some people who go through the sobriety thing, it's like you may not have had a lot of hunger, physical hunger in the beginning, but having never suffered through any sort of like physical want, it's like you almost kind of skip over the capacity to know what it's like to zero in on a need and then focus on it and then go after it and, you know, be hungry. Like you're like aware, it's not just a physical hunger, it's like a spiritual hunger or a whatever, like something you're like, man, like I want to get that thing. And so then you like apply yourself, something like that.
It is. And spiritual hunger is a good word, because that's probably what it was. That's probably what was happening for me. You know, there was a lot of spiritual unrest. Like I was raised Catholic. That was actually like a pretty positive experience for me. It I was connected with God.
I love that
you know,
I love that you just qualified that as a positive experience. I think that's precious.
I feel like I've always done that when I've talked about being Catholic.
Like I was Catholic, but it was positive. It was positive. It's fine.
It was positive. For me, it was, because I know it hasn't been positive for a lot of people, and religion isn't always positive for people. I think a lot of us are, am I a recovering Catholic? Sometimes, but there's also things what I learned early on was that God was there, and that if I was scared or afraid, I could pray. And that carried me. I mean, that's a revolutionary concept to a lot of people, right? To count on something else. But I had a hard time turning things over because I was tight. I was like keeping it all. I was trying to run the world, and I wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't like an ego control. It was like fear-based, like a lot of scarcity, and also just, also that I wouldn't really get away with anything. Like I wasn't someone who could kind of be a bad kid or go to a party or like you
would out yourself.
I don't really get away with things. Like I usually get caught. And so
no one gets away with anything, just for the record.
That's a mindset, right? But it also was kind of true. It was like I just didn't want to rock the boat, so I kind of kept it together. But what that did is like it set me up for maybe like 10 or 12 more years of like chaotically work hard, play hard. And like I had this really weird barometer of what I judged like pulling it off was, it was like this really strange sort of just high functioning alcoholism, but also just really uncomfortable constantly.
So uncomfortable.
Yeah.
When I started my first couple of businesses, like the goal was basically do enough work in 3 hours that I could realistically justify drinking the rest of the day. Yeah. So I'd wake up at like 7 a.m. and just kick ass for like 3 hours. And then it was like 10:38 would roll around. And I was off. I was like off to the races, Yeah. Me and a 6-pack of Coors Light down at Avila.
Wow. Yeah. Sounds nice. And you're being rewarded, or like it's being reinforced that what you're doing is working.
This is working for you, man. Look at you. You're living the dream. You're stressed out when you wake up in the morning, like somebody just like pumped like one of those like Pulp Fiction when he like stabs her with that big needle. That's how I wake up every morning. So every morning is like somebody just like stabs me full of adrenaline and cortisol. I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, we're doing this.
It's on.
My wife looked at me the other day and she goes, don't you have to pee when you wake up? I'm like, no, like my body does not wake me up. Like my mind wakes me up. And it's like, dude, yeah. I've been sitting here for 3 hours by myself. Get your ass out of that.
To be. Yeah.
Scary place to be.
The one thing I will say too about my childhood is there was just like the spiritual, like kind of that spiritual searching. And then also this sense of longing for something that I didn't quite know what it was. I don't want to say it was like a feeling of loss, but it was this sense of like, there was something I wanted that I didn't have. And it was, and then, just a bunch of generalized or, concern for life.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a setup, I wasn't having a lot of fun unless I was drinking, and then I was having too much fun. So it was
you were set up for that just that roller coaster. It was like pre-built. It was pre-designed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and some of that was modeled to me, and some of that was just disposition and personality and upbringing and situations. I mean, it's no one's fault, including mine, but it's also an opportunity to say like, what's my responsibility for how I want to live my life? Who do I want to be?
So if you were talking to like 21-year-old you, and you knew that you were like in the high functioning, work hard, play hard brand of alcoholic, what would you say to your 21-year-old you? Like, oh man, like.
I would say that I would need to trust my gut. There was a lot of ignoring my gut with things. And so some like situations and relationships and stuff got worse because I wasn't listening to my intuition. And I would also say like, this isn't going to get better, like it would just be, I mean, it's not like I could smack sense into my 21-year-old self. It was just like these things that are kind of tugging at you that you know aren't right. They're just going to continue to get more not right for you.
The beatings will continue.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this is a roller coaster right now, but if you keep riding on this roller coaster, you're going to be throwing up a lot, like you're going to have vertigo. It's going to stop working.
Right.
Because I was always a binger, right? So it wasn't like I was an everyday drinker, but then again, I was probably, in my heyday, drinking 4 nights a week pretty heavily, and then trying to pull it back together the other 3. So it was pretty miserable. Mm-hmm. But it was just, I was all or nothing. Yeah. God, I'm tired even reflecting on it. I felt my soul was tired, just so tired.
Just tired. Yeah. I came up with this like system of like, I learned how to really enjoy working out hungover. So I came up with this. Yeah, I know it's an art. And so I came with this system where I basically would like wake up an hour and a half into a workout from drinking because I would drink 1.5 gallons of water during workout. Right. And then I'd basically come to there at Kennedy, just like at the gym, and like now I'm awake and I'm like, oh crap, like I'm awake now. And then like I would start drinking 1.5 hours later, right? It was like that right back in.
Yeah.
But I know like for me, like what I would tell my high functioning 21-year-old self is, dude, this cannot be redeemed. It can never be better. Like there's nothing you can do. There's no amount of like relevance with friends or like, there is no like magical Great Gatsby Casablanca bar where whatever it is that you think drinking exists. Like there's no magical fairy tale land where the more you drink, the sexier it all becomes. It always just degenerates into some like grotesque, Wolf of Wall Street trying to climb into your Ferrari. Like, well, yeah, that's what I would say to my 21-year-old self.
Yeah. And I think what's hard is, I think there were moments where maybe we both knew like that it wasn't good. Like we'd have these at least I would have these little slivers. And then immediately I would have someone, in my circle of friends that was validating that it wasn't that bad. You were only like awful for part of the night, or just something that was kind of like softening the edges. And, we exist in a society where having a drinking problem is not something that anyone wants to look at least for me. Like I bartended, I have put on events, like I have been a poster child for having a good time. And so it was really hard for some people to understand that I had a problem and that what I was experiencing was alcoholism. Like that wasn't really fun for anyone to process. But a lot of people who weren't seeing me on a daily basis or drinking with me the last couple of years, like were really surprised to know that I had been struggling. And so I think it speaks to how open we are to know what it looks like, and also how comfortable we are having tough conversations.
I really think that people don't want to call somebody else an alcoholic because like if they're 2 drinks a night worse than them, then if they're an alcoholic, then that means that I'm really close to being one too, like by proximity. Yeah. So it's kind of like everybody wants to hang out with somebody like one step below them on every level, or maybe one step above, but like not 5 steps above. So I think people don't want to like, because if they acknowledge that you're an alcoholic, that means that they are really close to being one. And they're not ready to admit that about themselves.
And this is the part, Drew, that like blows my mind. Like that, I have 5 years of sobriety later this month. Like the part that makes my head like pop off is like admitting I'm an alcoholic and doing the work to remedy that condition gives me the life that I was trying desperately to get in the bar. Like what? It's just like, hey, like the worst thing about being an alcoholic is that you get to build a beautiful life if you're freaking lucky. If you put in the work, like you get to have the life that you think you're trying to attract, and you're at like the bar in Star Wars. I mean, there's these creatures around you and you're like, what are we drinking? I mean, that's what it felt like. And I was one of those creatures. It wasn't like me with my stuff together, sitting around with like degenerates. It was like, I was a person who was not moving through life as a person that was happy. You know, I didn't feel good about myself. I had a ton of shame because of course I wasn't looking at it like I had a drinking problem. I was looking at like I had a Lauren problem, you know, like
if I can just get this drinking under control, you know?
Yeah. And also that like the things that I was doing were caused by something that I couldn't control. So like being a jerk at someone's wedding. Well, that's not actually my fault. That's because XYZ, this, you know, it's because of all the circumstances that I willingly participated in and all the shots I took somehow made me sick at the end of the night and like terrible, you know, terrible, but like not my fault still, not going to have me change behavior still. And that's the part that I think I want to focus on this though, this part where we don't, as like people who have friends and family members who struggle with something, we don't know how to have tough conversations about the truth. And it holds us all back from actually healing and getting what we actually deserve and what God has coming for us.
Yeah, I struggle with this a lot because, like I said earlier, I was a ferocious Christian growing up. Ferocious. I mean, ferocious. Yeah. So, but the idea here is when people show up. When I grew up as a Christian, all right, like when I grew up, imagine my beard a little more gray. Nobody drank alcohol. Like I remember seeing one of my friend's dads have a Coors Light on a camping trip. And I thought, oh my God, does my friend know he's never going to see his dad when his dad dies because he's going to hell and he's going to burn forever? Like his soul he's going to piss his soul out when he's done with that Coors Light. I mean, I was convinced.
Wow.
And so later, of course, now we fast forward 15 years and then it's like every guy shows up to every men's Bible study with a case of craft beer. And it's like, if you don't show up with a case of craft beer, like you're a dick. And so it's like, well, when did alcoholism become cute? Right?
That is the question of the day.
that is the question I have is like I remember growing up and like not that many people drank. And if they did, it was like there was like 5 options for drinking. By the time I was done drinking, I don't know if you know this about, I had 800 gallons of whiskey stored behind drywall in a shop in Paso Robles. Do you know about this story?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So I recently won a gold medal at the Mid-State Fair posthumously. Yeah, I gave all my whiskey to a distiller in town who turned it into something and then entered it. And I have a medal from the Mid-State Fair.
Wow.
Of
this
that
drywall whiskey.
Yeah, my dry. Yeah, I bought 250 gallon stills and I started a whiskey distillery and I made 800 experimental whiskeys. And that was me. I mean, at the end, it was like a big giant storm in Templeton and there's like lightning flashing and I'm making whiskey in the back. I'm like, this is how it ends. This is it. This is like, you know, I'm drinking whiskey that I made from cookies and cream, like, you know, those yeah, right. This sounds great, doesn't it? You're like oh my God, cookies and cream vodka, that doesn't anyways, so that's how it ends, you know. And so but you can't redeem it. It just at what point does it stop becoming cute and do you not need to have 500 different options? Because it's not cute.
And the thing is, though, when did it, like you just said, when did it like stop becoming cute? Like, when was it cute? Because I still live in San Luis Obispo and I live a couple miles from the campus. And there's times where I see very drunk college students, as I was too. And like the level of public drunkenness that's actually still appropriate is pretty awful. Like it turns my stomach. And even when I was drinking, it would turn my stomach then too, like being in a bar downtown and there's some kid who's about to take a header and they're trying to get him out. And like people die like that. Like, where is there any?
Yeah, the cuteness ends somewhere between 2:38 a.m. and the poor girl walking back holding her shoes while she's walking down Broad Street. It's the cuteness ends somewhere between there. And I don't know when it's like, oh, like maybe it's like the extended adolescence that millennials have, that like, well, it's okay now to like stay at home until you're 26. And then it's cute to drink heavy until you're 26. Like,
but I think it really, like, I think what it also comes back to is there's nothing cute to me about someone not able to face their reality.
Sure, why not?
So like, that's not attractive to me. Someone that like, and I'm not saying people struggling in life and can't cope with something hard. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying people who are kind of refusing to look at the reality of life and what they're responsible for or what they've been through, and deciding like to face something with tools as a human who can like stay rooted in that place.
Okay.
Because I think what it is, it's, you know, this was like 20 years ago, right? So I graduated high school a long time ago, and I didn't have, I mean, I had a cell phone that like was for driving in the car for emergencies, right? Like
you could play Snake or something like that on your
media.
Nokia
Facebook
flip phone.
came out after I was graduated from high school. Thank God we had disposable cameras. I mean, there was no social media, there was no pressure. I mean, there was still pressure, but nothing like it is today. So, and then we have the accessibility of drugs and marijuana and alcohol is very normalized as a, you know, a carcinogenic substance. And so we have like, you know, I had alcohol at my ready at home. I just happened to be one of those kids who cared too much about like jacking my parents' bottle of vodka. They wouldn't have probably noticed, but I wasn't doing that, but it was still there. So for anyone who's having a hard time or simply just moving through life being uncomfortable, because life is uncomfortable, we're just told like, well, why don't you have a drink? Why don't you go to a party? Why don't you loosen up? Like, why don't you be more like this person that's an impossible standard? And so what's cute about that? What's cute about living a life that's inauthentic? Like nothing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so I think for those of us that actually are able to get sober is like just not picking up the cup to me. And that's huge, right? But then recovery is, what am I recovering, healing, letting go of? What are, you know, the steps, the process to actually make right? Like you said, like, you know, the redemption.
Right.
Right. Like,
well, there's something about like, I believe that sobriety is the beginning.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, now that you're sober, you can actually begin to live life. Yeah. Right. Like, and so nothing is worse than you see the people and it's like, they get sober, but they don't skip town. They just like get sober and then they like stay wherever it was that they were at. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, like you get sober so you can go on your journey of wherever it is that you're going to go do. That's going to like help you to live some sort of, you know, what I say is that you get the option to become the hero of your own story once you get sober. Like before you're sober, like you're not the hero of your story. You're just like some kind of slave walking around with a chain around your neck, because booze is the hero of your story. It's the protagonist. It's what's actually doing the deal. So what was your last day? What was your last drink?
Like
walk me through the last day. I don't remember my last drink. I think a lot of people probably don't remember their last drink.
Yeah. My last drunk was April 16th, 2016. And it wasn't anything special. It was a Saturday and I started drinking. I had a couple different events throughout the day I had to be at. And so I had like a mimosa with a girlfriend when we like did an event walkthrough. And then it was like, I had a couple beers at a barbecue, and then I picked up, you know, I'm still driving around, picked up a friend. We're going to another barbecue for dinner. We have a couple bottles of wine there, and I needed to get up in the morning and teach spin class. And so instead of going home, like I told myself after the barbecue, you're going home, I go downtown and drink till 2 a.m. I don't remember my last drink that night either. I don't remember getting home. But so again, like, what's cute about that? This is what it really was. I woke up on Sunday morning and I felt like hell. I was sleeping on the foot of my own bed like a dog, like a golden retriever spread out, and my back door was propped open. So like, I mean, I don't exist in my house with my doors unlocked now. Like, but this is just, you know, we let go of all of these normal behaviors, right? So back door's propped open, my cat's like looking at me, like judging me, possibly concerned that he doesn't have food or he's making sure I'm alive still. And I get up and I have to go teach in like an hour. So of course I'm throwing up. And all I can think in my head though is, you couldn't just come home after the barbecue. Like that was the actual story. It was like, you said you were going to come home after the barbecue, and then you went downtown and you knew what was going to happen when you went downtown. This is already like the voice. And I get to the gym and there's like a key code. You have to put in this personal code. And that last month of me drinking and getting up early to teach, which is not a really cute, talk about not cute, not a cute combination, but it's a 6-digit code. It's like a pin, right? And I was like, that last month I would get to the gym and I couldn't remember my pin. Like, and every time that happened, I was like, okay, you're just so tired. It's like, and your mind is like completely screwed. Like your system is like short circuiting, you know?
Right.
And that scared me. And it like, but again, I would just, you know, figure it out and then move on to the next thing. There wasn't any space in my life for like any you know, any like reflection or any consideration of like, what does this really mean that you can't remember a 6-digit passcode?
6 digits for your livelihood. Go.
Yeah. So I get up and I teach, back to doing crazy things while you're hungover. I'm teaching this class, and with spin class, like you have to do the whole freaking thing. I have the headset on and there's like 30 faces, and I'm looking out, and in the middle of class, then the thought's like, all these people think you're fine. And it was like, I am so done being a fraud. It was like, they think you're fine. You threw up 15 minutes before you taught this class. You're going to throw up the second you get all these people out of this room at the end. And like, you're good. Like, it was like, I was so sick of being a fraud, of like, I'm healthy. This is what health looks like. Trying not to have a heart attack on my spin bike, raging hungover from like a bender.
Hey, you know? Man. A little bit of pre-workout, you're good to go.
So that was Sunday, the 17th. The last drink I had was like a orange wheat beer that afternoon, desperately trying to just get some hair of the dog. That's what it's like. It started here and it ended
Your
with
last
an orange,
beer is a shock top.
An orange, yeah, it was like that, like an orange wheat beer that I probably kept half of it in my system and threw the other half up, you know? And I was just like, I felt the one thing about that hangover, I came home after that spin class, like crawled back in bed, but I felt different about, instead of being like, this is awful and you're going to feel less awful soon, and then you're going to pretend this isn't as bad and we're going to do this again. It was like, I felt like God was in the room with me. It's really hard to explain. I just felt like, okay, you feel terrible. We're going to get through. It was like this we're going to get through this and we're not going to do this again. And it was just that simple. It was like, this is actually never going to happen again. And it was just this but it was back to how I was so sick of myself. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wonder how other people felt, but I was like, you have done everything yesterday that you said you wouldn't do. So what do you stand for? Like, who are you? Like, you can't trust yourself. Like, you're never going to have a relationship where that person can trust you. You'll never be able to follow through with things for your family. You'll never show up at work on time and be in a good mood and have your shit together. Like, none of that's ever going to happen. It's going to be
these are two separate things, by the way.
Showing
up to work on time.
You're never going to get it all. And I was tired of trying to get it all and be repeatedly reminded that I didn't have any of it. Like, that's what it felt like. And it was it's funny because it was a little bit of like smacking myself in the face, but it was also this massive heartbreak of like, I've been breaking my heart for 10 years doing these little things, and suddenly, like the compound effect, right? We do a bunch of like small things in our favor and suddenly we're somewhere else. Well, it's like, I had been going half degree off for years, and suddenly I'm in a completely different direction and wondering how the hell I got here. And it's like, your choices compound in your favor or against you.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one thing that's interesting is that as you make poor life decisions or good life decisions, there was a famous kind of guru-y kind of character, and he said that you are the amalgamation or the sum of the 5 people you hang out with most.
Yes.
And if you're out drinking, you become the like sum of those same people. And if you're not, then, you know, so as you start to make better decisions, you just start adding different voices, you know, into your head. Right. And so it's like, it's not just like, you make these positive life decisions, they add to this. Well, positive decisions lead to that because the positive decisions lead to positive relationships, and positive relationships keep you accountable to becoming the person you want to become. Like and that's what I think is so, to me, that's the thing about the program that makes it different than just like not drinking, right?
Yeah.
It's that, and it's not like I want to like not disappoint my friends. It's that like I talk about this in my share a lot. Whenever I do like a share, one of my biggest things is that the voice of my favorite AA pitches is more potent to me than lines in the book.
Right.
Like whenever I see somebody out drinking, all I hear is Eric's voice in my head saying, here's to not feeling feelings, right? Yeah. And this line is just, I mean, I think I heard it my second day of sobriety.
Oh my God, that's so good.
It's so good, right? It's so good. Or like, well, one of my buddies, Kelly, he says the line, he says, I started drinking. He's like, I had 5 years of sobriety. I started drinking I was going to drink for 6 months to get through my divorce. And then I was going to get sober again. And 13 years later, he makes it back. And like that line, I mean, that stuff sticks with me, right? And I got all kinds of these. Or, like when Bo looks at me the second night of my sobriety and he goes, how does it feel to be, make the grade for AA? You're it, man. You're top. You're at the level. You're at the peak. How does it feel? And I was like, been sober, I think, for like 26 hours.
Oh my God.
And he's like, you've made it to the highest level of AA. And I went, what's that? He's like, sober alcoholic. You made it. Yeah. And I'm like, and in that moment, he had, I think, 17 years at the time. And I genuinely believed him.
Yeah.
I just believed. I was like, I am sober alcoholic. And his 20 years of sobriety, like, it didn't matter. Or my 2 days, that's like, I was really pumped about my 27 hours. Like I was like.
And the thing is, like, you should be, like, that's huge. And for anyone out there who's like listening to this, I just keep coming, like, I always come back to the, like, we have to dry out for things to start to put the pieces back together. And so when I see people coming in and out a lot and they're trying to get it, it's like whatever you can hold on to, like whatever accountability or numbers or reaching out, like I want people to get it, but you and I can't carry people in and out constantly and not think that we're going to start to like suffer the consequences of that weight. It's like, it's this dance of having a hand out and helping someone up off the ground, but not letting them pull you down onto the ground either. And it's hard. And I've struggled with this with sponsoring women, with relationships with women, with relationships with like men in the program that are going in and out. A lot of friends that I used to party with, I'm not the only person that was partying when I was and needed to get sober. Other people have, and I've seen what they've done. And it's not like everyone does it different. Some people do get sober and they still work in a bar. I was still bartending a little bit when I got sober. But the one thing that became really clear to me once I stopped poisoning myself, even like periodically, is the energy. I was very aware, back to the feelings. I was very aware of the funkiness in the spaces with a lot of people drinking heavily and how weird it started to feel. So what I started to feel was I'm not doing this work to get sober, to recover, to get these tools to clean up my life, and then to walk right back into the eye of the storm. For me, it was a vibrational thing, back to the sum of the 5 people. It was like, this isn't doing much for me anymore. Yeah. And thankfully it wasn't like my real bread and butter in terms of income. It was like something that I had done for fun, mainly because it allowed me access to more booze, more people with substances that I could have. And it just it allowed me, right? It was my big excuse. And so it's fine if that's for you, but we also have to get real with like, what's going to help us create a new behavior, different action? What's going to help us keep that life that we're creating, ongoing action of the same sort, So it's like, we can't expect things to be different because we put down a drink and then we're still walking into the same dynamics. And that's hard because we have all these people that we have been drinking around. My family, whether they're drinkers or not, had known me a certain way. I had to reprogram all of those relationships. And that sucks.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It does suck, but you know what also sucks? The way the relationships were before. So it's like, it all sucks. It just, it's a different sort of work. It took work and effort for me to be that miserable.
Yeah. Well, reprogramming relationships, that's why so many people get divorced or break up after they get sober. Right.
Yeah.
It's because, I hear my wife and I, we talk about this a lot. We talk about how like she had to deal with me being an alcoholic and probably my worst alcoholism, frankly, because she's there when I get sober. Right. So for 3 years, she's just really dealing with it, right? And putting up with far more than anybody should have to put up with, at all. And so anyways, so then it's like, then I get sober, right? Well, then I'm looking at her and it's like, well, now you need to watch the kids while I go to AA 3 times a week. And you can't drink anymore. And all of a sudden now it's like, wait a second, I have to deal with you being an asshole for 3 years. And then I have to make all these special provisions for you so that you cannot be. When does this become anything about me?
Yeah. When's this fun for me?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happens. And then so people, they're like, but I thought you were going to be so supportive of me. Like, I'm getting sober now and you're not supporting me. Well, it's like, look, it was all about you for 5 or 10 years or 20 years. And then you get sober and guess what? You're still wanting to make it all about you. For how much, like, so there's a real sensitivity, I think, that people who are newly sober, they don't understand. Well, and you're an Al-Anon person too, right? So maybe you can talk about this before we wrap it up. But it's like, well, one of the things we talked about, when you met my wife at Al-Anon, I think. Yeah. And it was like, we've had to really work on, and I had to work on my sensitivity that like, good for you that you got sober, but dude, like, she has there's an entire program that she has to go through of her own 12 steps to deal with yours 12 steps.
Right.
So how about you cut it out a little bit and give her some slack? Yeah.
And I think a great bridge to like the Al-Anon conversation goes back to like, we have a lot of dynamics and relationships with everybody we know. And so if we have our boozy programming or we are being shifty, we're not being honest, we're being like, it's just all this darty behavior and it's exhausting and it's all of this, it's like, it is, because it's not like I'm ever sitting back, like really comfortable with what I'm doing. I'm constantly like trying to move something around somewhere and like make someone happy. And so for me, Al-Anon is a couple of things. One, I have other family members and like friends who have issues with alcohol, and my relationship with them is challenged by their own intake of substance. But also I have a way of being in the world where I'm like, do I have an alcoholic personality? Do I have the disease of alcoholism? Yes. But I also have a tendency to overdo it with people. And so part of that is like, I could be dating someone who's a functioning alcoholic, which I've done. And so I got my own disaster thing, but I'm also watching you. I'm also keeping track of how many drinks you're having, because if you pass out at the bar and you're 260 pounds, I can't get you out of here. And then it's a problem for me, like in my mind, but also like realistically and physically. And then it's a safety issue, right?
There's actual
logistics. I've had people that I've dated, we've managed to get them home into a car, and I've left them in the car to sleep for the night because I cannot get them out and they are not conscious, And so that also fed a lot of my fear around like, no one has my back. And then you continue to hang out with people who are self-destructing like you are, and no one is going to have your back, So there's a lot to unpack there, but also just back to what I talked about with my family, these behaviors about things looking good and being in order and like overachieving and being really out of touch with what you need. Like your wife was out of touch with her needs because she was worrying about you, and so what we all end up doing is the disease of Al-Anon is we're trying to control people, places, and things, right? Someone else's drinking has become so obsessive to us that now we're behaving in a way that's not good for us. And it's not even like, that's our disease, is the obsession and the behaviors around someone else's actual intake of alcohol. Like,
oh, wow. Is that the moral of the story at Al-Anon? I've never known what I've like kind of like stayed away from it. Although like I have some, like I found my mom told me a while ago, Mom, yeah, I always knew my grandpa was an orphan. That was like a normal story. Like, oh yeah, your grandpa, he's an orphan. I was like, oh, okay. I found out like maybe like 8 months into my sobriety that no, my great-grandfather murdered my great-grandmother while he got trashed one night. And then my grandpa became an orphan. And it was like, Mom, you could have shared that story the first time we had a drink. Just want to let you know, family history time. Here, come here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your grandpa was kind of an orphan.
Yeah. And why do we do this? Because the disease, like it is active in my family, and that is simply the way it is. Do we want to talk about it? No, we don't. We absolutely don't. But what's happening now is, I can say 5 years later, like I have owned my story now, where at the beginning, like that first few months, I was like really proud of myself and also really overwhelmed because I'm still feeling all the things. All I've done is put down the drink. I'm picking up some tools, but I'm not slowing down anywhere. Right. And so part of where Al-Anon helps me is like, what's my lane? What's important for me? What, like, it's about like, I don't want to say it's about people pleasing or saying no. That's just the way it looks sometimes when we're being consumed with someone else's behavior. This can be with family members who are, have depression or mental illness, or just like a family member who has like a physical chronic disease or something. Like, you have to.
Al-Anon is like when you think about somebody else's problem, like, and you aren't taking care of you at all, or well, like
Al-Anon is for friends and family of alcoholics, for them to understand and to get some understanding of the disease, and that person with alcoholism is sick, but that they can't control that person's actions, and it gives them tools and community and support to move through those things and take care of themselves, right? So like when you read the 12 steps, we're still powerless over alcohol. We're powerless over alcohol of other people consuming it, whether we are or not. So for me, it kind of like, I like that the edges are blurred, because I think there's probably a lot more alcoholics that could benefit from Al-Anon, because it goes back to our relationship with other people. And we have tendencies, with or without our own disease being active, we have ways we do things, and that impacts other people around us, and vice versa, other people's ways of, like codependency, enabling. I mean, those are just ways sometimes it manifests for people, but that's not everybody's story. I mean, I think for me, that story of the overdoing, it's like, that's what I was doing for myself. And then I was overdoing it out of my lane constantly, in someone else's lane, telling them what they were doing wrong because I didn't like my lane. Your lane looked way more fun for me to tell you, for me to be right and not happy, than for me to be in my lane and actually work on my lane. Forget that.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the best way to explain it is like, someone's unmanageability of their own alcoholism is going to affect people around them who are not drinking the same way they are, period.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So your wife could speak to that too, but it's going to make her behave in ways that may not be the best for her. And if you're the one experiencing or creating a lot of the chaos and she's on the receiving end, how much control does she feel like she has over her life?
Oh yeah, no. And that's been part, and like, even as we've, gotten sober, or as I've gotten sober, she just doesn't drink anyways. Like, so it's just, not even, and she was my bartender for like years. So it's like,
so funny.
But she doesn't even drink, and she doesn't even like it. So that's kind of where I sit with everything, which is that trusting your gut and learning how to be like, learning when, like, if you've had enough of these experiences, you can just trust your gut that it's not going to get better. Like towards the end for me, I knew that the probable odds of me doing something I wish I hadn't done was about 1 in 5. And since I drank every day, 1 out of every 5 days had a pretty terrible moment wherein I wish that I hadn't drank at all for the previous 5 days. And then I started coming to this conclusion that for every 1 drink that I had, I was 10% less present.
Mm.
So at 3 drinks, if everybody's had 3 drinks, we're all 30% less here. By everybody having 8 drinks, we're only 20% present, and we might as well all just be the same person. And at 10 drinks, you aren't you anymore. There is just somebody else, like some dark, shadowy, boozy avatar that's like you meandering. And like, it's like you go to a club at 1 o'clock in the morning, like nobody is themselves. Everybody is who everybody else is.
Yeah, and there's nothing cute at 1 a.m. in a bar.
There's a reason the lights are out. There's a reason the lights are off. Yeah. It's not pretty. It's not cute. Look, you puking in a urinal is not cute. Okay.
Not cute.
No, it's just gross. Or whatever, or walking home with blisters and carrying high heels, that is just, it's just, I used to always feel so bad, or, you're just like, ew.
Yeah.
It's 6:30 in the morning. Like, man, you really crept out of whatever hole you were in. I mean,
it's funny. I've actually offered, like, being near campus, I've offered 2 women a ride at one point, and neither one of them took it, which was fine. I probably wouldn't have either. But like I was so uncomfortable watching this person like walk, and this walk of shame. I mean, that's just the language we use. Like, how screwed up is that, right? Like, that you should be so ashamed to walk home from your bad decisions the night before, and that everybody's done it. Like, even that in and of itself is awful. But like, I was just, she was going to wander the whole way through campus wearing what she was wearing. And I was like, well, I'm just going to ask her if she wants a ride. And she said no. And that was fine. But like, I would have felt really bad having not done that, like, yeah, that was my attempt at service for the day. But like, I know what that feels like to be walking through the consequences of your choices, and it's crappy.
It is. It is the worst.
And what I've also walked through the consequences of my actions enough without any change. And that also, like, you repeat the bad things over and over again enough, and then you don't think that there's another way to do it. Like, you forget that you don't have to do that because you just keep choosing it over and over. Choosing being a loose, like, it's very subconscious, but like, we're still choosing to poison ourselves,
Are you getting a phone call?
Sorry. I'm embarrassed.
Don't be.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, you're right. You're right that once you learn that you can suppress bad feelings by drinking, that becomes a nail, and the booze just becomes a hammer. And every time you feel bad, you have a hammer to hit that nail with. And the problem is that not all bad emotions are bad, and not all good emotions are good. So I've and then we'll kind of we can kind of wrap it up in just a moment. I've come to realize now at this point that 2 things. First is that when I meditate, quote unquote meditate, I've changed the word meditating from like not thinking to not judging. I spend 20 minutes in the morning not judging anything that enters my brain or my body. I let the emotions come. They're like a little wave. I watch them, and then I say bye. And then it's like, maybe it's a good thought, maybe it's a bad thought. I don't know. I just kind of wave. And then another thought comes, and you just kind of let them go without judging yourself for being good or bad, like compassionately looking at someone and say, look, like, I'm me, I was born, I've made some decisions, I've lived some life, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
And from that point, you can choose whether or not you want to keep drinking or not.
Yeah.
There's no judgment to your drinking. It's just, do you want to continue having those experiences?
Yeah. And for me, it was like, if I keep doing this, what might I not get that would otherwise be coming for me? As someone who was always rooted in like losing something, or what was, the other shoe dropping. It's like, if I keep doing this, I kind of know where it's going to take me. I'm surrounding myself with people doing it, the same thing. Maybe they're a few years down the road. I could lose another 10 years easily doing this. And then I'll wake up and I'll be 40 something in a bar, and I'm going to wonder why I don't have the things I wanted. And Like I could already
Oh.
see it. Like the
Yeah, you're
path
going to
was
become a
pretty clear.
used to could.
Yeah. And like, is
Oh,
that
I
gonna
used to
be
could
okay
do
with
that,
me?
you know? I
Yeah.
used to, yeah. As you said, we take 5 shots in a row, and you're like, well, I used to could, you know? Yikes.
So it just comes back to that, like, what are you missing out on already? We kind of know in the back of our heads, you know, we show up late to things. We miss people's birthday parties. We don't, you know, like just the things that started to slide. I don't pick up my mail all the time. I don't pay a bill on time. Like those things that were like, well, I'm still, you know, I haven't suffered any consequences. It's like, yeah, but your life, like your day's a disaster. Look at your house, you know, like it's just, you know what I mean? Like, but it's hard to get real with ourselves, and God forbid anyone in our life is honest enough to tell us. We'll just bite their head off, you know? So it's like,
Yeah, right.
It's hard to win, you know? Yeah. And I've been on both ends. I've had friends I've been really worried about, and people have been worried about me, and it's all uncomfortable, but you know what? It gets better if we're willing to just lean in. You know, you're already uncomfortable. Why don't you do something uncomfortable in your favor? Like go to a meeting, reach out to someone, like dry out a little bit, seek some help. I mean, there's so many resources once we start that process, like it's right there at our fingertips, but we have to be uncomfortable enough with what we're doing in order to even get there. It sucks.
That's right.
No one walks in feeling good.
Nobody walks to AA going like, you know what? I'm just happy to be here.
Sounds like a good idea.
I'm a newcomer and just thrilled about it. You know,
it's the last house on the block.
It is. It's also the one that has, it's like, you know, like I was the poor kid, but all my rich kids' friends, they all played at my house, you know. It may be the poor kid's house, but you know what? There's a lot of love in that house, you know?
Yeah.
So,
totally.
So I think what I'm hearing from you is trust your gut. Your life is probably a disaster if you're still drinking. And if that's the case, it doesn't have to be. Yeah.
It can be better. What might, like, who could we be if we weren't doing this to ourselves? Like, that's really what it is. Because the answer to that, it's already inside us. It's not that we get sober and we become these other people. You know, it's like we become ourselves. Isn't that what we're all trying to do anyways? And we're finding all these ways to be cuter versions of us that's like totally not working. Like, that's what it is. Do you want to be yourself this lifetime, or do you want to phone it in and be miserable? Like, that is the...
Well, if you keep pouring poison on the tree, it's never going to have any pretty leaves, you know?
No, it's not. Yeah. And, you know, you and I are still like young people, and like, I would not, like, the quality of my health and life and everything, it wasn't getting any better, and it doesn't, you know? And I was working really hard, like you were at the end, like working really hard to keep all the plates spinning, and it wasn't working anymore. Yeah. So if you're feeling like this, I mean, it's possible and it takes work, but like, it's all work anyway. So I think we need to stop saying that it's like a lot of work to get sober. It's work. It's work to stay miserable. It's work to stay in a relationship you hate. It's all hard.
We all must suffer from one of two pains: the pain in discipline or the pain of regret. And it really is a tough shit universe. Like, you can either say tough shit while you stick a insulin needle in your ass because you have type 2 diabetes, or you can say tough shit while you get up and you go to a spin class.
Yeah.
I don't know. You kind of pick your poison. But I think at that point, you know, if what you're saying is I wish I hadn't, well, then next time don't.
And really don't.
and it's okay. It's okay to skip. And your friends who leave or whatever, like, they weren't your friends. The new friends you get are infinitely better.
Yeah.
There's just nothing quite like becoming the person. And I like how you phrase that. It's not that you become a different person. It's that who you actually are gets revealed.
Yeah. And back to trusting your gut, like, that is through behavior that builds our self-esteem. You know, that's through being honest about things that are hard. And I wasn't doing any of that at the beginning, you know? And so being able to say, like I was very relieved, like my first, like 1 through 3 months, I just had so much relief that I wasn't causing more chaos. you know, like I did. I
Yeah.
felt truly like in my soul. And I also felt like I understood that the healthiest thing I could do for myself was to not pick up a drink. Like I identified it as poison, and that helped me, because it wasn't like I'm a bad person because I'm a bad person. It's like, this makes me into someone I don't want to be. I need to remove this from the equation. It's so basic, but it didn't click to me till the very end, when I was really ready to look for support. And that, like, this is, you know, it has us by the back of the neck. Like, we think we're a dog on a bone and we love alcohol. And it's like, we're the freaking bone. The dog has its teeth wrapped around us. You know, it's running the show. And I think
right. Yeah. No, you are definitely, not in control. That is true. But I am in control of this, and we are right at 1 hour and 15 minutes or something. And